The Dental Download Podcast is your source for insight into dental school, conversations with dentists, specialists, and leaders in the industry. With new episodes every Monday morning, I'm your host, Haley Schultz. Let's get into this week's episode. Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily and then distribute it everywhere and even earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters. Here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right away from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify, but also everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available, and you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. Did I mention it is totally free, no catch? I've been using Spotify for Podcasters since the very beginning of my show, and now we're nearing our 200th episode, so I can definitely say it's an easy platform, and I've really loved using it. So be sure to download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. Okay, hi everyone. We have a guest here today, and I'm going to let Dr. Kyle introduce himself a little bit. If you can just talk about like your educational background, where you're practicing now.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Dr. Kyle Poulsen. I went to school in California for undergrad and dental school. Dental school is at Loma Linda University School of Dentistry. Graduated in 2015. So I've been practicing for almost 7 years. And how far do you want me to keep going with this? Yeah, I could talk forever.
Yeah, I mean, one of my next questions was just going to be, what was your journey like after graduating dental school with finding a job and everything?
So I didn't know any dentists growing up. Like, I have no connections. I don't know anybody. My dad is a contractor, turned tire salesman, and my mom stayed home. And I wanted to be a dentist just because I had a really cool dentist as a kid. My undergrad, as far as I know, I was the first one to go to dental school from it. So we were just kind of winging it. And so that kind of is important because translating into after dental school life, like, I was pretty lost. I felt prepared, like, clinically. I'd done a ton of extracurriculars. I was good on clinic. I felt comfortable being a dentist, but didn't know how to, like, I don't know, turn myself into one, I guess, business-wise, where to go, who to talk to, how to, like, be a partner, market myself, stuff like that. So I had every intention of working in a private practice, owning something. I always knew I'd be an owner in whatever capacity that meant. And I had this kind of vision to go back and partner at the office I grew up in, which was a pediatric practice that GPs only did pedo. And so I was like kind of moving towards that and had talked to them, and they turned me down at first. Came back a few years later, and we can get to that. But I ended up throwing out applications to a few private practices who were looking for partners. And I just didn't find anything that felt worthwhile, or just hiring associates. And I remember one guy was like, "Oh yeah, I have 4 operatories. You can have one." It's like, okay, sure, whatever. And he's like, "You're gonna have to bring all your own patients because the ones that are here are mine. And so you're gonna have to market your own patients. And I don't want to have to stop and help you. And I don't want to." And it's like, well, I'm independent. Like, I could figure that out, I guess. I don't know. And I remember he had a CEREC machine. I'm like, "That's cool." He's like, "Yeah, but people don't appreciate it. So I scan it, and then I invert it in the software, and I mail it when they're gone and tell them I sent it to the lab." I'm like, "You're so backwards. Why would you do that?" And I was just like, "Dude, this guy's crazy." And then he cut the lady's cheek with the drill and told her that she bit her cheek. And I'm like, that's like too much unethical for one day. So that didn't pan out. I applied to a really high-end practice in San Luis Obispo because I was like, I'm going to move by the beach, and, didn't get anything back from that. And I was looking, kind of all over Southern California, and just nobody wants to hire a new grad with no experience for somewhere in a decent practice. I think that there are obviously some, because there are people who do it, but I didn't find anything. And so I ended up reaching out to Pacific Dental Services, and was 100% thinking, like, it's not going to happen. Like I'll work for a while and bail, and uh, went to interview in Northern California. That's where I'm from. That's where my family is. So it's like, I guess I'll move back to NorCal. And when I was interviewing up there, it just didn't feel right. I didn't hit it off with the person who was interviewing me. And kind of just fell into where I was in Menifee, California, which is Southern California. And we're an hour from everything. We're like an hour from San Diego, an hour from Carlsbad, from LA-ish, from Palm Springs. Like we're kind of just right in the middle. And I have some family who's down here. My wife's family's in Riverside. So it seemed like, it's like, yeah, that's kind of a cool fit. And it just really fit me like in my personality, and it fit a whole lot better than I expected. And so, years later, I had this opportunity to partner in that office that I had always wanted, that pediatric office. And a person who's a very good friend of mine and a mentor, she's my manager for a long time, was like, you have no idea what you're doing. Like you'll hate yourself. Don't do it. And I'm so grateful to this day that I didn't, because I don't know, man. I think if I was locked in a pediatric practice, I would have lost it by now.
Yeah, it's definitely a certain personality to do peds, especially if you have your own children. Like it's just the kids at the specialty offices are like the ones that really need to be there. So it can be draining if you don't have the specific personality for it, I think.
It's really interesting that you said that, because the doctor there, when I was talking to her, she said, I just need you to understand this one thing. You'll use your energy. You won't have energy for your kids. Like you won't want to see your kids when you go home. And I was like, oh man, that's pretty heavy.
Yeah. And obviously not what you decided was right for you.
Right. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about working for Pacific? Like what have been some of the pros and cons of like the DSO structure, and how do you like your role there?
Yeah. Like I said, I went into it. I wouldn't say I was negative, but I was definitely probably more pessimistic than I should have. Just like very, very skeptical, like big time. Like, and I'd encourage you to ask hard questions, for anything you're getting into. Don't be afraid to figure it out. But the office that I was in and the owner that I was working for, I think we're great people. The owner's awesome. She's super ethical, hardworking lady, great business mentor, strategist, kind person, and so those are things that are really important to me. And if we're being honest, there are probably offices that are not quite like that, and you'll have friends who go through it, and DSO, not DSO. I think you got good people and you got bad people. And so I fell in with good people. And so I had a great experience because of the people I think that I was associated with. And so as an associate, I think the camaraderie was really great for me, because leaving school, I felt super lonely. I was like the chair of, or co-chair or vice president or whatever, of a bunch of different committees, and ran a bunch of clubs and did all this stuff. And then it all comes to a screeching halt. And you just like say bye, and you never see your best friends again because they move like across the country. So it was super depressing for me. And thank God I had my wife and my kids and stuff, because it gave me something to do. But with Pacific Dental Services, I was able to go to like orientation. And so it's like a few days where teach you kind of the basics of like, hey, you've worked for a couple months now. These are things that most people struggle with. These are things that can help you do better. These are things that can make you faster. And then at night you'd go and sit around, have a couple drinks, and talk to everybody and realize, oh my gosh, everybody feels as stupid as I do. This is great. So having that support from other people, I think, was really reassuring. And being able to have those opportunities for growth, and have other people give you feedback on where you can improve, and what you can do, and how you can be better, like at case acceptance. That's really what it was for me. And for PDS, I think as a whole, is, not necessarily like diagnosing different or diagnosing aggressively or anything like that. It's just, how can you be better at doing more of what you say you want to do? And so if you can just do that, you're great. Because so many of us, patients don't even do a third what we're suggesting. So you don't need to overdiagnose. You just need to be better at doing more. And so as you learn that, and you're doing, consistent dentistry, you're making a decent living, there's kind of that opportunity of, hey, do you want to stick around, you're going to be an associate. Everybody kind of hits this point, like, are you going to leave? Are you going to be an owner? Are you going to move on and do your own thing? And I think is that kind of fork in the road that people decide. And that was when that pediatric partnership thing kind of came up. And I was talking to a friend about it, and he was really torn with a similar decision. I had already become an owner at the time, and he's like, I just don't know what to do. And I was like, are you happy? And he's like, yeah. I said, do you like your job? Yeah. Do you like the people you work with? Yeah. It's like, well, then why would you look for something else? And there's so many people who hate going to work every day. So if I love my job and I love my people and I'm making a good living, like I'm happy. I don't need to look. Like I love what I'm doing. Like, whether other people think I should or not, I love it. And so I was an owner after about a year and a half, probably closer to 2 years from graduation when I opened the doors to my practice. And we've been open about 5 years now.
I guess I'm going to just go on a little response to what you were saying. I feel like that's one of the great things about Pacific is that you get that mentorship and you get that coaching from like so many great people and people that are doing the business well, that are doing the clinical skills well. And it makes it, I think, a lot easier to kind of replicate it and bring it to your community wherever you're opening up that office, it seems.
Yeah, I think it's great in that there are so many systems in place. And if you can, kind of function within a system and tweak it to make it your own, but still like the basic bones are there, and you go, yeah, I like this framework. I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's you can replicate it and you can be successful with it. And so I felt that way in school too, or in most of the things I do. Like, I always use this analogy is that there's always somebody in class who like makes flashcards, right? And if they're like, hey, I want to share these flashcards, I'm like, that's awesome. I'm going to use your flashcards. But if I had to make my own, I just wouldn't do it. I feel like it took too much time. It wasn't efficient enough. I'd rather just, cram and read through the PowerPoints and call it a day. And so I feel like that's kind of like what a model for, at least the PDS DSO is like, hey, we've come up with all these, partnerships, these relationships with vendors, these strategies, and like, here they are, kind of do what you want with them. And so it makes it so much easier than kind of building something from scratch.
Did the office that you opened as owner, was it like totally de novo, like a brand new space? Okay.
Yeah.
So what were some of the challenges with that? I'm sure that there were many.
Yeah. I mean, you're taking me back a bit. The de novo, I think, is really exciting because it's very much yours, And so that was attractive to me because I wanted the challenge of it, but I also just wanted to be able to make sure that the culture that I wanted for my practice was going to be alive there. And so the challenges, I think, are, as a new owner, probably the biggest things is learning how to like hire and fire people. It's so hard to figure out what you're getting out of somebody and what you can get, or those questions that you can ask to try to figure that out in a short period of time. And so over the years, I've, probably was really attracted to like very flashy, like, wow, this person knows so much. And I've gotten more towards, this is a really good person. And I think good people who I almost cussed, give a rip, are so much more valuable. And I'd rather work with them. I want to be surrounded by good people. I want people who treat people well, who say please and thank you, who are kind, who work hard, who want to earn it. Like, those are the people that I'm attracted to. And so now it's like, if I had two candidates and one is, oh, I've been working for 10 years, but they're kind of a jerk, and one who's straight out of school, but they have a heart of gold and they're just like dying to learn and dying to figure out like how to be better. That person is so much more attractive as somebody to work with and somebody to develop as an associate, because, I want to teach and they want to learn. Like, we're going to get along really well, versus somebody who goes, oh, I already know everything. Like, I don't need you, which, maybe you don't for the basics, but there's still a culture in place. There's still a way that we do things, and there's an expectation. And I think people who know it all aren't as open-minded to doing things in a particular way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So do you have an associate with you now at your practice?
I do. Dr. Walters. He went to Loma Linda also. He's been with me for, man, it's almost 3 years, I think.
Okay.
Uh, and then hired again. So we have somebody starting this summer.
Okay, nice.
So
Growing.
we're fluctuating around three. We grew very, very quickly. And it's hard to keep associates around because I think like me, people want to move on and do bigger, better things. I had a patient ask like, well, what happened to so-and-so? And I mean, I lost an associate recently and we're still friends. It wasn't like for any particular reason. It's just, I had to move up north, and kind of just move on with life. And I think compared to medicine, we're still very entrepreneurial, and almost everybody wants to do their own thing and be their own boss and make their own rules. And so they go for a couple of years and go, all right, hey, great, thanks, I got everything I need. See you later. And so
Yeah.
we want to be a part of that. It would be great to have them stick around and partner with them and open an office, but it's not right for everybody.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. What would you say, like, in your opinion, is kind of the sweet spot for how many operatories work well and like how many hygienists to have each day?
That's a hard question because it really depends on like who you are as a person. Like I don't hardly know you, but I feel like I know enough that you thrive on stress a little bit.
Yeah.
And you just like to be busy and you like to figure it out and you like to problem solve and just like you bite off more than you can chew, but you figure out how to chew it. And I'm kind of like that too. So for you, I think the bigger the better. You're going to find a way to staff it. You're going to love the challenge of operating it. You're going to love, oh man, I lost somebody, but I'm going to find somebody and, plugging and playing and stuff like that. So for somebody like you, I'd say go as big as possible just because the challenge is fun if you like that kind of challenge, right? So that's what I wanted to get into. I'm like, yeah, as much as we can do, let's do it. Even like first day you open, they're like, do you want to pay to build out a few chairs or more chairs? I'm like, as many as you'll let me build them out. Like we're going to fill them up. But I had a friend who I worked with years ago. He was like an associate, my senior, had been there for a few years. And he's very stressed out just by the volume, I think, and by the number of people in the practice, the number of people to, I guess, keep track of. And since there were doctors, your assistants would be the exact same person every day. The front office, you might have somebody to work with differently each day. And he just needed that control. And so he opened his own practice. And I think he's so happy, and it's like 3 operatories and he does a lot of his own hygiene. And he's just so much happier with just knowing exactly where everything's going to be. And if he leaves a pen on this table, it'll be there tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure it's a lot of personal preference and how you want to practice. That makes sense. Would you say, like, as an owner, how many hours per week are you doing like clinical working with patients versus managerial running everything?
It's a good question. I kind of mix it all together. As you're doing a de novo, there's so much to do, and like you're always growing and always challenging yourself. And I think if my office had started slower, I probably would have been more structured in that. But we were like, the day we opened, we had patients lined up at the door. And so it's been busy since day one, and we've been just growing, just catching up with it. So we, started out thinking like, oh, I'll take a day off each week and do administration and stuff like that. And then they're like, hey, we got, 10 new patients. I'm like, oh, well, squeeze them in on that day. I'll do that instead. And so it's kind of gone that way for me. I had just gotten to a point where I was doing Fridays and trying to do admin on Fridays. And then my associate moved up north. So now I'm picking up Fridays again. So generally, I think, like, at least with Pacific Dental Services, there's so much there. You could technically not do admin, right? There are people who probably don't do any of it at all. It depends on your level of commitment and I think how successful you want to be. I think if you rely on one side of the relationship to do all of that work, then you're not getting the full potential out of it. And so I am still very involved with it. I like to know what's going on. I like to interview people who are going to the front, and I make sure if somebody has to get fired, I'm the one doing it just because I think it's my obligation. I think just as a leader, that's what you do. the number of hours, like I just squeeze stuff in when I can because I just like to stay busy. And so I'll do lunchtime meetings and I'll do morning meetings. I'll squeeze stuff in here or there and work probably too much, not because I'm forced to, but just because I like it. I like working and I like trying to do better each day. So I make my life harder than it has to be.
Yeah, but if that's like what you kind of thrive on, like, and you get excited as you see your business is growing so well, like that's something to be proud of too. So that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's palpable. You can see the fruits of your effort, you know. So when you're putting in that much, um, just that much of your passion into something, it's great to see it grow. And so it's almost addictive, right? You're like, oh my gosh, like I did this and this happened. You can see that cause and effect relationship, and we'll continue doing it and see what happens and see where this takes us. And you get more and more invested in it and want to be more and more involved just to try to do that. And then you get to a certain level that you need to learn how to turn it off a little bit and delegate. And that's when it gets really tricky.
Yeah, that was one of my other things I wanted to talk to you about was like work-life balance and like having time for your family. How have you tried to maintain that?
At first, I didn't. So, but it was a very real conversation with my wife, and I said, "Hey, I want to open a practice. I want to do a de novo, and I think the expectation should be that I'm going to work like a maniac because we can't afford for this to fail. Like, I don't come from money. I got a bunch of student loans. Like, we got to figure this out. It's going to work. It's like, so you're not going to see me for 2 years, and we're going to blow through all of our savings." And that was like the expectation I said just from the beginning. Like, I'm going to work like 6 days a week, and like we're going to make it happen. And it was more like we didn't blow through our savings. We made more money than we thought, but she still didn't see me. And I probably worked to that level for probably 3 years, I would say, and started take. I don't think I took a vacation, like a real like vacation, for at least 2 to 3 years, and then now I'm a lot more comfortable doing that because I have support. So I have associates who understand the culture. They can take care of patients comfortably, and I can get out and do stuff like that. And there are times when you can and times when you can't. But I'm home. I try to be home every day by dinner. Uh, I wasn't before, but now my kids are getting a little bit older and I really want to be there. And so like it's a bad habit, but I like to keep my day busy. So half the time I work all day and I don't do my notes. And then I'll come home and have dinner, put my kids to bed, and do my notes at night. And so at least I still get to see my family on time. I get home right on time and then sit down and watch TV and write my clinical notes.
Yeah, I get that. And it's tough at the sacrifice you had to make, but it's paid off. So that's really good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so grateful for where I'm at. I'm very fortunate, and I had the benefit of working really hard growing up. My dad, we built like swimming pools for a living in the summer. It wasn't uncommon to work, over 60 hours in 110-degree heat in Central California. So air conditioning, like alone, you're like, yeah, I'm good. And then when I was trying to get into dental school, it took me like 3 times. I kept getting rejected, and it was heartbreaking. But while I was doing that, I was doing research at the Center for Dental Research from like 7 in the morning until 2, and then I'd change in the bathroom and I would go to the Olive Garden, and I was a waiter until like 10:30 or 11, and I wake up, and I did that every day for like 3 years. So once you get to school, like even dental school, I didn't put in that many hours. So it's the office it's difficult and it's stressful and it's hard work, but I worked more hours before, so it's kind of like easier in some ways.
Yeah, it sounds like almost in your journey, the years in dental school were like the least busy and least time consuming in a way.
Yeah, I love dental school. It was great. I'm so happy to be done, but I would go back if I had to. It was worth it.
Yeah, I have a few more questions about dental school in a minute, but when you were talking about opening up your practice, you said that you were busy from day one. Do you think that was really good marketing? Were you just strategically in a high need area? What was the reasoning for that?
So a little bit of everything. Um, I was fortunate enough that I was an associate down the street, right? So I was an associate in another Pacific Dental office that was like a mile and a half away. And so I think the most important thing you can do when you're starting out is reputation. And you can't just decide one day that you're going to be an owner and you're going to be different. I think if you're planning on owning an office or working towards ownership, that growth and that development has to start like now. and you start acting like an owner. So even if you're just an associate, the decisions you make are acting the way that you would 2 years from now. The way that you treat your patients, the way you treat your staff, the way you develop people. Like, you need to practice that. You need to start doing that so that you can attract staff, you can attract patients, whatever else you need to be successful. People already know what they're getting into, right? So the other half is we're in a tremendously fast growing area. And so we're like the very outskirts of where anybody would live in Southern California. Like, it's not what people think of. I still think it's great because I just have kids and we, go to Target or whatever and go to the parks. Like, there's not, like super cool gastropubs. Actually, we're out by the wineries, so it's not too bad. But the places where people are moving to instead of from are great places to be, because they're moving there and they have to look up, who's going to be my dentist. They have to make that decision. Instead of, if you're in an established area, people may choose to do that, but they're not forced to, right? So when people are relocating to an area where they're building tons of homes or whatever, it makes it a whole lot easier. So we're right in the middle of that, where I think we have a perfect like trifecta of really good patient care. We have a great online reputation. People like us and they tell their friends about us, and there's a million people moving here. So it's like just the best of everything, I think.
Yeah, that's good. Good planning. Like I said, strategic move of thinking where populations and communities are going to be headed over the next few years. So that's great. I wanted to kind of transition the conversation before we wrap up just about your dental school experience. And I know you mentioned you reapplied to dental school. Do you want to speak a little bit about that process of getting accepted?
Yeah. I mean, do you want me to go all the way back to like applying and stuff? How far do you want to go? Yeah. All right. So I went to undergrad at a school called California Baptist University, and it was an awesome school. It was like the size of a high school. Like, there was nobody there, but lots of nice kids, and the faculty was amazing. Like, the nicest people who genuinely cared. There's one faculty, Dr. Prince. I'm gonna shout him out because I love that guy. He's great. And he like had no idea what he's doing, but he was committed to getting his students into professional school. Like, he just was going to be the guy to figure it out. So he made all these connections and would go out to the like UCLA, Western University, USC, Loma Linda, and go to all these career fairs or whatever, where he could meet admissions committee people and start like trying to push the school. Because like I said, as far as I know, I was the first one to go from my undergrad because we had never done it before. And with that came a lot of naivety because, now I feel like there are so many resources. Like, I'm amazed when I look at like your YouTube channel and just Instagram, like everybody's got this like pre-dental tips and stuff. Like, we had a student doctor network, and that was kind of it. And it was just a bunch of people lying about how qualified they were, pretty much just to make you feel bad about yourself. And so you're trying to just figure out what to do because I didn't have anybody who went before me, and I didn't have really any connections. So I missed the first application cycle. I applied as a senior and I didn't know any better. It's like, so I had to take a gap year. When I took my DAT, I had a 13 in OChem, which is like embarrassing and abysmal. The reason I say that is just because there's probably other people who got 13s in OChem, and it's like, you could figure it out, I was really good at PAT and reading comprehension, but my sciences sucked. Like, I didn't want to be a scientist. I didn't want to be a biologist. I didn't want to be a chemist. Like, I took the classes because I had to, not because I had any real passion towards it. If we're being honest, I should have majored in like art and then taken my prereqs, and I would have been so much happier. But the first day I showed up at college, they're like, give me a dentist. All right, you're a biology major. And I went, okay, cool. And so I did that. I got 0 interviews. I applied to like 15 schools, 0 interviews, straight rejection letters, like, and they came fast. So there was like no chance. I applied again the second year, and in doing so, since I got rejected, I had reached out I just like cold called the research lab and it's like, hey, do you guys need any externs? Like, I'll work for free. They're like, I don't usually do that. I'm like, can I come by and meet you? Can I come by for an interview tomorrow? Like, yeah, I guess, sure. And so I came in and ended up getting a job where I worked for free for 6 months. So I worked like 6 hours a day for free every day, and just like menial lab tasks. We did spore tests for like sterilization assurance stuff to make sure the autoclaves worked. And then as I was there longer, they ended up paying me, I think, because they felt bad, and got into some really cool clinical trials and other types of research that was like just so fascinating. But again, the next year I retook the DAT. I think I got my LChem up from like you're gonna laugh. I think I got it up from a 13 to like a 16. But man, that was progress, right? And I didn't have any money. I mean, I paid for everything myself, so that's gonna have to be good enough. Hopefully, somebody likes me. And I applied to about 6 schools. Like I did like all the Californias, and then one in like Texas or so. I don't know. Just like I just picked the school with like the lowest scores that I could find and like applied there. Uh, Rejected by everybody. I got an interview at Loma Linda this time, so I was psyched about it, and they proceeded to destroy me because my GPA was like 3.2, and my DAT sucked still. And so it's like, yeah, dude, there's like no way you'll get in here. It's not going to happen. Like we gave you an interview, but like get real, and kind of gave me some pointers on what I had to do if I wanted to get in. And so the next year I continued to work and tried to do as many pointers as I could. But again, I was working full time at both of those jobs and trying to fit in classes. So I did like a organic chemistry class, and I did, what else did I do? I retook the DAT. I think I did one or two other things. I got the OChem up to 17. I'm like, dude, it's like, that's as far as it's going to get. Like, it's not going to happen. So I got that up. And then the other scores were all like 18, 19, and the PAT and reading comp were like 26s or something. And so I just applied to Loma Linda this time. I was like, you know what? Like, if we're being honest, nobody wants me. Like, they're getting sick of me. This is the only place that anybody's seen my face before. And I've walked up and down the halls enough and said hi to the admissions committee ladies that like maybe there's a chance, right? And I was sitting at home one day, I got a letter, and there's a straight up rejection, no interview. And it broke my heart. I was like, so I don't know. I don't know if you've ever lost anything that important before, because I was at the point where my prerequisites were expiring. So they give you 5 years before you have to retake like Gen Chem, Gen Bio, all this other stuff. And so that was it. Like it's been 5 years since I took those classes. They're no longer valuable. I'm not going to go back to college for undergrad. Like, I guess I'm going to be a biology teacher. And it was like the darkest day of my life. Like I legitimately, I've never been so upset. After I kind of composed myself, I called the dean of research, who I worked for. And I was like, hey, just want to let you know that I didn't get an interview. I got rejected. I don't know that I'll continue there. Like, I'm just in a weird spot right now. We'll see where we're at. And like 20 minutes later, I got a call. And it was like, hey, Kyle, we put your name in the wrong pile. Sorry, we'll go ahead and give you an interview next week. I was like, what? Like, so obviously I'm psyched, a little bit skeptical, but I'll take it. So I got it, went in there, and proceeded to get a flat tire on the way there in the rain. But I left super early because I was paranoid. Changed my tire in my suit in the rain, got there on time, and had an interview, and talked about the things that I'd done differently. Like there was an acknowledgement that things were a little bit better. Like, okay, there's some hope here. Really leaned on like my research and stuff like that, and proceeded just to wait. And so I didn't get a call until I think it was like March. And so I got accepted in March, and it was a long wait. Best day of my life. Like, I've had kids and I'm married, so not my best day, but really, really close, right? Like, I can't say that. But up until that point, like, I've never been so like fulfilled and so happy. So I talked to my wife. I'm like, hey, either we're getting married before or after dental school. I'm going to dental school, so it's either going to be now or it's going to be in 4 years. We're like, let's get married. So we got married, and I got a call from the 5th floor, and they're like, hey, we need to talk to you. And I go in there, and they're like, we just don't think you did enough. We think we're going to take it back. And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, well, there was some notes in your file about things that you were supposed to do and you didn't do all of them. So we're not comfortable offering you a seat anymore, and we're going to take it back. And I was like, no, it's not going to happen. And they're like, well, you have to understand the position we're in. I was just like, no, I don't understand it, and I don't care. Like, I'm going to be here. You're going to figure it out. Like, sorry. And I don't even remember what happened. I think I was in shock. Like, I don't remember anything after that. I just remember being like so terrified and so like blown away that somebody would do that. And somehow I still ended up at school, I think, because I was like, no, like I'm going to come anyways, even if you don't give me credit, like I'll just be here. I'm just going to bug you guys. And so I I remember the first day of school. I remember meeting everybody. It was amazing. I was so excited. Loma Linda does a biochemistry for summer. Like you start and it's just like 3 weeks of biochemistry. The entire class is 3 weeks long. That's it. So it's like all day long for like 6 hours. You get it out of the way and then you move on. And the first test, the guy was super nice. He's like, you can have a study guide. And the kid next to me, I had like a complex because I felt super dumb because I'm like, I'm not gonna be able to do this. They already told me I'm not gonna be able to. They've already said the fire hose in your mouth type of thing like 1,000 times. And he seemed super smart. And he's like, oh, I'll make the front, you make the back. I was like, okay, sure. Yeah, sure. Why not? And we get there and it was just gibberish. Like his side was like the most unhelpful, like unreadable, illegible, terrifying thing I've ever seen. And I got the second lowest score in the class. And so like straight to the fifth floor, they're kind of like, and I told you so. And I'm like, hey, I know I screwed up. You'll never see me up here again. And luckily I got that one extra chance and they never saw me there again. And it certainly turned something on. I mean, I did everything I could at school. Like anytime there's an opportunity to stay late, I took it. Anytime there's an opportunity to lead a club, I would do it. Anytime there was volunteer like service stuff, I would do it. We ended up running every like community clinic at Loma Linda. We did like homeless clinics, student clinics multiple times a week. We got awards from the ADA for having the best run clinics. ASDA type stuff. We called it DSA. And then I was actually in ASDA, and it was just like every opportunity that I could to try to prove that they made a bad decision. I think I don't know if that's what was going on or if I was just trying to prove it to myself, but I did like every single thing that was possible. I think that's why I had such a hard time when I graduated, because it was like I had so many different like things going on and then they all just stopped, So again, like the community of like PDS really worked for me, because like now I've been an owner for almost 5 years, and I speak, I teach, I teach CAD CAM classes, I teach CBCT. I get to, have access to so many different people and their knowledge and information that you get to challenge yourself daily, because it's like, hey, I want to start doing all on fours. And the guy down the street does them, and we don't really compete with each other because we're friends. I'm just going to have him teach me how to do it. Like, well, there's a little bit more to it. I haven't done all on fours yet, but kind of went that way with implants and kind of went that way with Invisalign. And we help support each other and build each other up and talk about how, hey, my office is doing really well. Let's compare this and that. And maybe if you do this differently, you'll do well too. And so it's a super supportive community of a bunch of people who like to have fun with each other. It's pretty cool.
That's great. And it was cool to kind of walk through all your journey with you. It was a emotional roller coaster.
I know.
Listening. My goodness. But I mean, I just admire your perseverance there. That's incredible. And I'm just happy to see that everything worked out in the end.
I appreciate it. Me too. I could have gone a lot of different ways.
Yeah. One last thing before we wrap up. What are some of the things you mentioned, just kind of jumping at every opportunity in dental school, but are there anything else that you did in dental school that you feel like helped you when you started working?
So I think people have it backwards in dental school. Yeah. Half your class is trying to leave as soon as they can. They're playing games during lecture. I did one filling and I got 4 hours of free time now. And like, if you really sat down and thought about how expensive every minute you're at school really costs you, you'd be begging people to talk longer and you'd be trying to do as much as possible. And so I think that's what I did one day, where I was talking with somebody, I can't remember exactly why, but I would never leave early. If my patient no showed, I would help somebody do an impression, or I would shadow an upperclassman, or talk to somebody about cases, or go sit in pros or whatever. And I think really just taking advantage of the safety net that is dental school and trying to get as much exposure as possible, not being afraid to push yourself and make a mistake while you got somebody who will bail you out. So there's so much that can be done there, and people don't take advantage of it because they want to go home early. And so it's 4 years of your life, but like, I did not feel like I had to do a GPR when I left. Like I didn't think that was anything that I would ever do. And there were other people like, oh, I'm gonna do a GPR. It's like, wow, like if you just like, paid attention in class and tried a little harder, that's not fair. I have friends who did GPRs who were super smart. They just wanted to, right? Because you get like implant, endo, all this stuff. But like, there's a difference between wanting to and feeling like you have to. And I think some people have to because they're just not, I don't know, you probably shouldn't say that. That's not fair to people. GPRs are cool. But the the thing is, I think so many of us don't give it everything we have. And if you're allowed, oh, you have a patient for 4 hours. It's like, well, nobody said I couldn't have 2 patients or 3 patients in that 4 hours. It's just most people do one. So why not do 2 or 3 if you can? Like, yeah, it's a ton of work and it's really, really hard. But even on lab stuff, I would always go as fast as I possibly could, because one day I'm not going to have 4 hours to make a prep and a temp. So pushing yourself to learn as much as you can and be as fast as you can. And eventually you realize, man, my 10-minute prep is almost exactly the same as my 3-hour prep. I just did it a lot slower. And you can start pushing yourself just to be faster and more efficient, more effective. So when you're working on patients, they actually enjoy being there. They don't feel like they're being tortured for 4 hours.
Yeah, that's very true. And I definitely like what you ended with there, that like it's as long as you're doing good work, like the patients appreciate when it's faster too. They like to get in and out of there quicker.
Yeah, I mean, good has to be the main goal, right? You can't be fast and horrible, but being really slow and perfect is not as important as being really fast and really good. So there's perfect and there's really good, and like you have cement, like it's going to fill in that little ripple, like whatever. uh I think people hold themselves to these super, super high standards, which is awesome. But there's like all these pictures on Instagram of everything being just the most beautiful, perfect, amazing thing. And like, really clinically, is it going to make that big of a difference? Probably not. And if you're trying to get better every single day, like that's why it's called practice. But you cannot, I just don't see it as being helpful for anybody if it takes you hours and hours and hours to complete a regular task. You have to think about the business side too. You want to run a practice, you want to generate revenue, you want to have financial freedom. You can't do that by doing 1 or 2 things a day. So once you can increase that capacity and work a little faster, more efficiently, you can generate more revenue too. And you have time to do admin stuff. You have time to coach people. You have time to train people and keep generating that or growing also. Time is like the only thing that you can't get more of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'd rather work fast and have more time.
Yeah. I totally see what you're saying. I know you gave a lot of great advice already, and we kind of talked through like your whole journey, but do you have any closing thoughts or like final advice you want to leave for dental students?
Do something that scares you every day. That's it. So whether it's in school or whether you're an associate, I mean, I'm not talking like scary, like you're going to get arrested, but when you have that doubt, like, man, I'm not going to pull out that tooth. That's crazy. I'll refer it. It's like, what if I did? I'm gonna try it. Like, what's gonna happen? If you have major fears, like, don't ignore that. There's always something in your gut that tells you, maybe don't do this. But don't let that fear of like, what if I fail, prevent you from trying new things. Do your research and plan it out a week ahead and watch a ton of videos on it. Ask a bunch of people how to do it better, but just do it. And so I think every day you should do something that scares you, whether it's having a tough conversation with an employee about, hey, you're not really at where I need you to be at, or confronting a patient who's being abusive, or doing, that extraction that you're afraid to do. That's the only way that you're going to grow, and nobody's going to make you do it. So I think every day you got to do something that you're just like, oh, I don't want to do that. I'm going to go do it. And you'll be surprised how quickly you grow by doing that.
That's good advice and something I need to hear. I'm always working on it, but I definitely am the type to want to kind of stay in my comfort zone. But that's not really possible in dental school now. So it's good. It's forcing me out of my comfort zone.
It'll definitely help if you make that deal with yourself.
Yeah. Is there a good way for people to contact you if they have questions, and like your Instagram so they can follow what you're up to?
Yeah. I'm on Instagram a lot. It's Dr. Kyle Poulsen. So DrKyle, and Poulsen gets spelled wrong all the time, but it's Poulsen. And I think one of the things to know is that I was always afraid to ask for help. There are so many people who want to help, like really, like it's just innately, I think, in them. And if you need help, reach out. I'd be happy to. But there's a ton of other people too. You reach out, people like to give each other advice. People like to be the one to help you get to where you're going. So don't be afraid to ask for help.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time tonight. I really appreciate it.
Of course, it was so great to meet you and to talk to you in person.
Yeah, you too.